Can you believe it is 2025 already and it's time for the new camping season? So that means it's time to dewinterize and get this camper cleaned up. So a short video, first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to get some power in here so I can see what I'm doing. Going inside to get some lights turned on and get some windows open and maybe get a little cross breeze. It was a perfect and beautiful day to do this, but still a little stuffy on the inside of the camper. But it was great to not have to worry about having air conditioning on. And I decided this time I was going to start with fleshing out the winterization for the plumbing. That means getting all of that marine grade antifreeze out of the pipes with a clean water flush. And I go ahead and put my filter on here, even though it's just flushing the system out. I feel better about having filtered water going through the whole system. And I am starting with the city water connection, which means something you connect a supply to rather than being self-contained in a holding tank. Now, once the water is turned on, then it's time to flush those pipes out, turning on all the sinks. Here's the kitchen sink. You can see that pink antifreeze that helped winterize it over the winter. Here's the little bathroom sink. Going to flush out the shower head by just pouring it right down the commode and then flush the toilet itself. And once the city water connection is done and the pipes are flushed out, now I'm going to do the freshwater holding tank. We really don't use this tank that much, but I do like to have the option. So every year, at least once a year, I do clean and sanitize this tank. It's a 30-gallon holding tank, and so that means I need approximately 1 cup of bleach for 30 gallons of water. And the way I do it is usually I put in about a half a cup to about a half a tank, and then I do the rest of the water so that it has a chance to swish around in there real good while the water's filling up. And then, of course, you can also drive the camper around and give it a good shake on some bumpy roads to make sure that bleach solution gets all over the holding tank. And then it's time to run it through the pipes again, just like we did the pink antifreeze through the city water, and then drain it all out of the gray water tank. And of course, I don't forget the low water connections as well. And here comes my least favorite thing of the whole dewinterizing process, and that is changing the anode out of this hot water heater. I changed it every year, whether it really did well or not the year before. As you'll see in a minute, I probably could have got another year out. But this is the long socket that really helps because that anode is always in there in an inconvenient spot. I hate this box because I call it the box of 1,000 cuts. Why do I call it that? Well, that's because you can cut yourself right here, and you can cut yourself right there, and then you're bound to cut yourself right there. And right about there is where you're going to nick yourself. And then up here is another spot to make sure and open your skin up. I hate this box. Did I mention that? And the long socket helps, but hey, there's proof positive. I'm going to cut myself at least once, and I believe I cut myself a second time after this. But it takes the larger socket wrench for this. It won't work on the smaller ones like I have in my little tool kit that I keep handy in the camper. I had to borrow one of these large ones from my son-in-law. And with the large socket, it's really not too difficult to get that anode out of there. The real challenge is getting the new one in. If you're wondering what a anode is inside the hot water heater, what happens is that this this anode, this bar that fits inside the hot water heater, attracts corrosive metals in the water. And what it does is it corrodes the anode instead of the tank lining of your hot water heater. So essentially what it's doing is it's extending the life of the hot water heater. So you can see how that's corroded, but there was still a lot of anode left on this, but they cost like $6. So for me, I think it's worth it to just have the peace of mind to have a hot water anode replaced every season. You can see the difference here between the new one and the old one. I probably could have got a whole other season out of this old one, but this is fine. But before I get to the great fun of actually rethreading this new anode in there, I do give this a good washout. Some people use a pressure washer for this. I just stick my hose in there and give it a good flush to get out any of that residue that's in there from the sitting over the season and from the last season. And here's some of that residue I was just talking about. Some of these minerals that were sitting inside the tank. You could see them there, contrasted against the black of the cover. And now I'm going to spare you I think what took me about 8 or 9 minutes to get this anode rethread. It's just because of the angle, and you can't feel the angle. And it does have, by the way, the anode does have this plumber's tape on there, and that's a good thing for getting a good seal. But getting this thing threaded right, first of all, it's crucial. You don't want to cross thread this. You don't want to mess up the threads on the hot water tank or on the anode, unless you got a bunch of anodes sitting around. But getting it threaded properly, I cut a lot of video out of here. Seriously, it took me like 8 minutes to finally get it to thread properly so that I could tighten it down. And I had to close the pressure valve because I had it open while I was flushing out the hot water tank, and it needs to be closed in order to move on to the next steps. And that next step is to fill that hot water tank up with water and make sure that it works. Now, the hot water tank has valves for both incoming and outgoing that are closed off for the winterization process. Don't want that antifreeze in the hot water system, in the hot water tank. So that's closed off and bypassed when the winterization takes place. So now I've got to open those valves back up, way back up here and underneath, so that the water can flow in and out of the hot water tank. But only the fresh water that I've already cleared through the system. And if you're not a small person, or if you're not as limber as, maybe one once was, then it can be kind of a tight fit back here. But it only takes a minute to flip those valves back over and then put everything back together so that we can test the hot water heater. Now I turned the water pressure back on, turned the system on, and went outside to check before I actually turned the heat on, the gas to the hot water heater, to make sure that there were no leaks. There were no leaks, and so now it was time to turn on the gas and heat that hot water up. And since I turned the gas on, it was the perfect opportunity to go ahead and test the stove, the range, and make sure that the gas lines were still working, there were no spider webs clogging the line or something like that, and that everything turned on. And it thankfully it worked just right, like it's supposed to. And even though I could hear the hot water heater kick on, I'm just going to go outside and make sure that I can see and hear that everything is good, and run my hand over there. I can feel the hot air coming off, so I know that that tank is heating up. And of course, I tested the hot water a little while after that, and I know the hot water heater is working when the hot water comes out so blistering hot that you can't even touch it. All is well. Of course, there were some things I didn't show in this video. I didn't show checking the tire pressure and pressure washing the camper, and just general cleanup. But we're ready to go. We're ready for an enjoyable camping season, especially these early months when the weather is more mild, not so blistering hot. But we're looking forward to getting away from the phones and getting out, seeing some of our great state, and enjoying the outdoors. Hope you get a chance to get outdoors, and I sure do appreciate you watching. See you next time.